Here we are, another discussion. Here today, there is a pronunciation situation in English that either as a linguist or as a learner of English, you would want to know. This is an interesting phenomenon. It's phonologically similar to the situation of the plural S in English, but not entirely. We have a video which I recommend you go watch. In that video, we divided plurals in English into two groups, regular, irregular. Then we analyzed how do we pronounce the S or the ES in plural. Now, let me introduce the new situation, the new challenge, which is the regular past tense in English, for which we need a phonological rule in the same way that we need a phonological rule for the plural S in English again. As a learner of English, you will hear a lot of sentences. Help, helped. I helped my neighbor every day. I helped my neighbor every day. What happened in the regular orthography? We added ed. Here, we add a t sound in pronunciation. I worked really hard. I worked really hard. Again, pay attention to the phonetic forms that I have transcribed here. I never borrow money. He borrowed a lot of money. Borrow is interesting here because we add ed, but in the pronunciation we just have the. For work and help, worked and helped, we had ed, but the pronunciation added ta, but here we have ed, it adds the. I play volleyball. He played volleyball. I told him to sit. He sat. I have phonetically transcribed using the IPA alphabet the verbs in present and past. So as you can see here in sit, the vowel is green. Here, anything that turns it into past has been colored in blue. Now you can see that the situation of the past tense in English is kind of interesting, fun to deal with, but it's not very straightforward. I have grouped these verbs together. Most of these verbs have ed in their spelling, regardless of the pronunciation. They have ed, work, worked. But sometimes there's no way you can explain it. Sit, sat, tell, told. And then I created two groups, which you must be already familiar with. Help, work, borrow, play, which I have put under the category regular. And then sit and tell, which I have put under the category irregular. Indeed, this is a very small subset of the verbs in English. If you continue your journey of learning English, you will come across a lot of verbs. Here, I have put under each category more verbs, and I have transcribed some of them. Feel free to transcribe the rest of them at home or in the comment section. The good thing is when you transcribe the stem of the verb, then you can copy paste it and add either the or ta. Visit. Now visit becomes different. You see, in terms of regularity, it's a regular verb. In most of these, in the past tense, we had either ta or da. But suddenly, for visited, we have a new form, which is not ta or da, it's ad. And I'm not going to continue the discussion of the irregular past tense in English, because as you can see, the regular section, although the name is regular, but again, there is three subgroups of regular verbs in English when it comes to pronunciation, right? So in writing, you say, oh, I'm just adding ed and I get the past tense. It's so easy. But if you look at the IPA, you would see that no, all of them are ed, but they're pronounced in three different ways. Now, as a learner of English, you want to know when to pronounce which. Or as a linguist, you want to know, okay, I know this is the case, but can I write a rule to explain this situation? Can I write a rule with which if they give me the present form of a verb, the present stem, can I successfully predict how to pronounce the past tense if it's a regular verb? Before we take up the problem, you need to look at the different areas of linguistics and what is what. In linguistics, we have morphology. For example, knowing that the past tense of regular verbs in English is formed by adding ed or d is a rule of English morphology. However, knowing that ed or d is pronounced either as ta, da, or ud, depending on the surrounding sounds, is a rule of phonology. the whole situation is a morphophonological situation. And when you're dealing with phonology, and we're going to stick to the phonological aspect of this, in your analysis, you need to look at the surrounding sounds, the sound or the sounds preceding and the sounds following the sound in question, and look at their phonological features, their distinctive features. Or one of the most important ones is voicing. I have grouped the verbs in English A, B, and C. So the first group is a DA group. Verbs that end in a vowel, borrowed, closed, loved, and played, they go to the first group. They're part of the DA group. In group B, we have the TA group. Helped, pushed, worked, looked, stopped, and watched. In the last group, we have a special group in which we have DA, but we also have schwa parenthesis. Edit, edited, ended, needed, shouted or shouted, visited, wanted. So imagine we are just beginning the science of linguistics and we look at these things and we want to find the patterns. Okay, the first group, what we have is ED or D is pronounced as D, right? If you look at the preceding sound, there's no following sound here because this past tense morpheme is a suffix and by definition it comes at the end of the verb. Therefore, you need to know that it's most likely and almost definitely the preceding sound that determines whether ED is going to be pronounced as D or ta. If you look at group A, you would see that all the final sounds in all of these verbs are voiced. All of the final sounds are voiced. Therefore, it's pronounced D. In the second group, all of the final sounds are voiceless. Pa, sha, ka, they're all voiceless. Therefore, it's pronounced ta. In group C, though, the ending is ta or da. Ta is voiceless and da is voiced. And here it becomes totally confusing because one of them is rule 1, one of them is rule 2. And the initial analysis that we had and seemed very smart falls apart. Therefore, we need to come up with a more sophisticated solution to this analysis. That's why you need linguistic training. It becomes ud after alveolar plosives. Again, if you're not sure, look at your IPA chart. You see ta, da are alveolar and they're plosive regardless of their voicing. If they are not alveolar plosive, then we look at voicing. If they're voiced, it's da. If they're voiceless, they're ta. Let's write a rule for it. Phonological rule. The voiced da of the regular past tense suffix is changed to ta after a voiceless sound. This is how you can write one of the rules here. This one. Voiced becomes voiceless when following voiceless. To regular language, a voiced segment becomes voiceless when the preceding segment is voiceless. This is a general rule of assimilation. We have other things here. When you add the da to the verb, the base of the verb, and you end up with two das. So load, for example, becomes load. You can't say load. You can't lengthen the da consonant. Therefore, you need to epenthesize a schwa because in English we don't have long consonants. I'm building up to the final rules, providing all the possible explanations, none of which is sufficiently accurate. The following rules describe these variations of the pronunciation of the regular past tense morpheme. Insert schwa before the past tense morpheme when a regular verb ends in an alveolar stop, ta or da, giving ud. Change the past tense morpheme to a voiceless ta when a voiceless sound precedes it. The past tense morpheme has the base form da. Pronounce da if no rule applies, which means that you just need two rules, and if none of those rules apply, then the default situation is A. If you remember, in the many phonological analysis videos that you can find on this channel, we always had an elsewhere case. Here, the elsewhere case would be the da case. You can write the rule in two ways. You can write the distributional statement. You can say the past tense phoneme da is pronounced as ud if it is preceded by a consonant that is alveolar and plosive. which means plus alveolar plus plosive. So da becomes ta if it's voiceless and not alveolar, not plosive. And elsewhere is da. Now this is the rewrite rules. The plural suffix da becomes ad when it's preceded by a consonant that is alveolar and plosive. If it's not alveolar and plosive at the same time, it becomes ta if it's voiceless. What if it's voiced? It remains da. Okay guys, I hope this step-by-step analysis has helped you internalize how you can write rules. So now you're familiar with the process and the journey and the picture, and this is something you need to practice more. You instinctively speak your native language. Then as a true linguist, look at your own language, but also always be adventurous and try to look at languages. I don't know if I've told before or not, in order to analyze linguistic data, you don't have to have any degree of familiarity with that language. You're just given a data set. You can just look at that data set and figure out the pattern and write the rules. And make sure you watch the many videos in the phonology playlist that I have. See you next video.